Imagine standing in a gleaming boardroom, the air crackling with tension, facing the man who threw you out like garbage when you were just 16. My uncle, smug in his tailored suit, thinks he's untouchable until I slide a single document across the table. The deed to my stolen inheritance. His face drains of color. His voice falters. "Alina? How is this possible?" I lean in, calm but unyielding. "I'm here to take back what you stole. Everything. If you've ever dreamed of making those who wronged you regret every second, stay with me. This is my real-life story of betrayal, grit, and the sweetest revenge." Hello, everyone. My name is Alina Voss, and I'm 29 years old, living in the vibrant, fast-paced heart of Boston. I'm a corporate investigator, the kind of person who digs up secrets companies pray stay buried. But today, I'm not here to talk about my day job. I want to share something deeply personal, a story of pain, perseverance, and a comeback that still gives me chills. This isn't some polished script or a Hollywood plot. It's my life, raw and real, from a scared teenager to the woman who flipped the script on those who tried to erase her. If you've ever felt the burn of betrayal, the sting of being called nothing, or the hunger for justice, this one's for you. Hit that like button if you're ready for a story that'll make you cheer, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss more tales like this. Grab a drink, settle in, because we're diving into how I turned the tables on the family that discarded me. Let's get started. Let's rewind to where it all began, to a time when I was just 16, living in a sprawling mansion on the outskirts of Philadelphia. Picture it. Marble floors polished to a mirror shine. Crystal chandeliers casting prisms of light across high ceilings. And a grand staircase that seemed to belong in a movie. But beneath the opulence, the house was cold, hollow, like a beautiful shell with no warmth inside. The air carried the sharp scent of my uncle's cologne and the faint chemical tang of furniture polish, but no sense of home. My parents died when I was 7, killed in a car accident that left me with fragmented memories of their laughter and a fortune I was too young to understand. Stocks, properties, a trust fund meant to secure my future. Orphaned, I was sent to live with my Uncle Richard and his wife Margaret, my only remaining family. They were supposed to protect me, but instead, they became the architects of my betrayal. Uncle Richard was a towering figure, his slicked-back hair graying at the temples, his eyes cold and calculating behind a practiced smile. He ran Voss Enterprises, a real estate development firm that built glittering skyscrapers and gated communities. Margaret was his perfect counterpart, petite, with a face that seemed perpetually pinched, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. They lived for appearances, their mansion a stage for their wealth. But to me, it was a prison. My room was a converted attic, tucked away at the top of the house, with slanted ceilings and a single, drafty window that rattled in the wind. The floorboards creaked under my steps, and the air smelled faintly of dust and neglect. At night, I'd lie on my lumpy mattress, staring at the peeling wallpaper, my heart heavy with a loneliness I couldn't name. From the start, I was an outsider in their world. At dinner, they'd sit at a long mahogany table, clinking wine glasses and discussing business deals, while I pushed cold mashed potatoes around my plate. My stomach nodded. "Alina, sit up straight," Margaret would snap, her eyes narrowing as if my posture was a personal offense. Richard barely acknowledged me, his gaze sliding past me like I was invisible. When I tried to join their conversations, maybe mentioning a book I'd read or a school project, they'd exchange looks, their lips twitching with suppressed amusement. "Don't bother with big ideas, Alina," Richard would say, his tone dismissive. "Just focus on not being a burden." The word burden landed like a slap, my cheeks flushing hot, my fingers tightening around my fork until my knuckles whitened. Why do they hate me? I'd think, my throat tight with unshed tears. I didn't ask for this. The betrayal began subtly, like cracks spreading through thin ice. When I was 12, I overheard them in their study one night, the door ajar, their voices low but sharp. I'd crept downstairs for a glass of water, the house dark except for the soft glow spilling from the room. "She's a liability," Margaret whispered, her voice venomous. "That trust fund's locked until she's 18. We need to control it before she starts asking questions." Richard's reply was colder. "She's just a kid." My heart pounded, a sick feeling twisting my gut. Handle me? I tiptoed back to my room, my bare feet cold on the hardwood. My mind racing. What are they planning? By 14, the cracks widened. They restricted my access to family accounts, claiming it was for my protection. When I asked about my parents' estate, naively, thinking I deserved to know, Richard's face would harden. "It's complicated, Alina. Adult business. You wouldn't understand." Margaret was blunter, her smirk cutting deeper than his words. "You're lucky we took you in. Most wouldn't bother with an orphan." Each dismissal was a needle, pricking at my confidence, planting seeds of doubt. I'd sit in my attic room, clutching a photo of my parents, a faded snapshot of them smiling at a beach, my mom's hair whipping in the wind, and whisper, "I'm not nothing. I'm theirs." But the doubt lingered, a shadow that followed me to school, where I'd hunch over my desk, avoiding teachers' eyes, afraid to draw attention. The real blow came at 16. It was a crisp October afternoon, the kind where the air smells of fallen leaves and possibility. I walked home from school, my backpack heavy with textbooks, humming softly to myself, unaware of the storm waiting. When I reached the mansion, my world shattered. My belongings, clothes, books, that old stuffed bear I'd had since I was 4, were stuffed into black trash bags, dumped on the front lawn like garbage. Margaret stood at the door, arms crossed, her face a mask of cold resolve. Richard loomed behind her, his expression unreadable. "You're not our responsibility anymore," Margaret said, her voice like ice. "You're 16, old enough to manage." My knees buckled, a wave of nausea hitting me. "What? You can't," I stammered, my voice breaking. Richard cut me off. "The trust fund's gone. Bad investments. There's nothing left for you here." His words were flat, final, like a judge's gavel. I stood frozen, the gravel driveway biting into my sneakers, the autumn wind chilling my skin. My hands shook as I grabbed a bag, the plastic crinkling under my grip. "You're lying," I whispered, tears burning my eyes. Margaret laughed, a sharp, cruel sound that echoed in my chest. "You've always been a burden, Alina. Time to grow up." The door slammed shut, the lock clicking with a finality that felt like a death knell. My chest heaved, a sob tearing free, as I sank to my knees, the grass damp beneath me. They stole it. They stole everything. The betrayal was a physical ache, a raw, pulsing wound. I was homeless, penniless, an orphan discarded like trash. My thoughts spiraled. Where do I go? What do I do? But beneath the despair, a spark ignited, a fierce, stubborn resolve. They'll pay for this. I'll find the truth. That night, I slept in a bus station, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, the air thick with diesel fumes and the low murmur of late-night travelers. I curled up on a bench, my backpack as a pillow, my heart racing with fear and defiance. I'm not done. I'll come back. Survival became my mission. I moved between shelters and friends' couches, the smell of institutional soup and cheap laundry detergent becoming my norm. I worked grueling jobs, waitressing at a greasy diner, cleaning houses until my hands cracked and bled. The diner was a haze of burnt coffee and sizzling bacon, the floors sticky under my sneakers, the customers' tips barely enough to cover bus fare. My body ached, my eyes burned from exhaustion, but every dollar went toward night classes at a community college. I chose law, driven by a burning need to understand what had been taken from me. Night after night, I sat in a dimly lit classroom, the air heavy with the scent of chalk and old textbooks, poring over legal texts until my vision blurred. My fingers cramped from note-taking, my mind buzzing with terms like trusts, estates, fraud. Each lesson was a weapon, sharpening my resolve. I'd whisper to myself in the quiet of my rented room, a tiny space that smelled of mildew and hope. You're not a burden. You're a fighter. The betrayal fueled me, a constant fire in my chest, pushing me through sleepless nights and endless shifts. At 19, I landed a part-time job at a small law firm, filing papers in a cramped office that smelled of ink and stale coffee. It was menial, but I listened, absorbing every conversation about corporate investigations. That's where I met Elena, a senior investigator with a sharp mind and a warmer heart. She noticed me lingering by the coffee machine, eavesdropping on her discussions about financial fraud. "You're curious," she said one day, her eyes narrowing with interest. "That's dangerous." I grinned, nervous but bold. "I want to learn." She took me under her wing, teaching me how to trace money trails, spot forged signatures, and unravel complex schemes. "You've got fire, Alina," she'd say, her voice steady. "Don't let it burn you out." By 24, I'd clawed my way into a boutique corporate investigation firm in Boston. The office was sleek, glass walls, humming computers, the faint scent of new carpet. My first major case stopped me cold. Voss Enterprises, my uncle's company, was under scrutiny for shady loans. My pulse quickened, my palms sweaty against the keyboard as I dove into their records. Late nights in the office, the city skyline glittering outside, I uncovered a labyrinth of deceit. Shell companies, forged deeds, diverted funds. My parents' fortune hadn't vanished in bad investments. It had been stolen, funneled into Richard's skyscrapers and Margaret's lavish lifestyle through a web of fraud so intricate it took months to untangle. Bank statements, emails, fake signatures, they all pointed to one truth. My uncle and aunt had built their empire on my inheritance. My hands trembled as I compiled the evidence, the printer's hum echoing my racing heart. They thought I'd disappear. They were wrong. Exposing them wasn't enough. I wanted justice that stung. I used my savings and a small inheritance from a distant aunt to start a private investment firm, operating discreetly through proxies. I targeted Voss Enterprises' distressed loans, buying them up as their company overextended, bleeding cash from reckless expansions. By 28, my firm held their debt, a ticking time bomb. When they defaulted, I called a meeting, my heart thrumming with anticipation. This is for you, Mom and Dad. This is for me. The drive to Philadelphia was surreal. The city's skyline, a mix of memory and menace. Voss Enterprises headquarters loomed, glass and steel, a monument to greed. The lobby was all marble and mirrors, my heels clicking with purpose. In my briefcase, I carried the original trust deed recovered from an old family lawyer's dusty archive, a faded document that held the truth. The boardroom was a fortress of power. A long mahogany table, leather chairs, and floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing Philadelphia's skyline. Richard sat at the head, his suit immaculate, his posture radiating control. Margaret was beside him, her diamond earrings glinting, her eyes glued to her phone with bored arrogance. The board, executives in crisp suits, murmured nervously about the investor who demanded this meeting. I entered, my briefcase a shield, my pulse steady but electric, like a storm gathering strength. Richard's eyes flicked up, then froze. Alina? His voice cracked, his face paling as recognition hit. Margaret's phone clattered to the table, her mouth falling open. The board shifted uncomfortably, sensing the shift in the air. I smiled, calm but lethal. Hello, Uncle Richard. Aunt Margaret. It's been a while. What is this? Richard demanded, his voice rising, a vein pulsing at his temple. Margaret's eyes darted to him, then back to me, her hands clutching the table's edge. I opened my briefcase, the click loud in the tense silence, and slid the trust deed across the table. Its yellowed edges stood out starkly against the polished wood. This, I said, my voice steady, is the deed to my parents' estate. The one you claimed was lost. I own it, and your company's loans, through Horizon Investments. Richard laughed, a harsh, desperate sound. This is ridiculous. You're that orphan we. He stopped, his words catching as the board's eyes widened. Margaret leaned forward, her voice venomous. You're nothing, Alina. You can't do this. Her hands shook, betraying her bravado. I produced a folder, thick with evidence, bank statements, forged signatures, incriminating emails. You stole my inheritance, I said, my voice cutting through their denial. Millions in assets funneled into your skyscrapers, your vacations, lies. I've got proof. And as your creditor, I'm calling in your debts. Sign over Voss Enterprises, or I foreclose everything. The room was a vacuum, the air sucked out by their shock. Richard's face flushed crimson, his fists slamming the table, papers scattering. You ungrateful little, how dare you, he roared. The board flinched, some whispering, others frozen. Margaret grabbed the deed, her nails digging into it, her eyes wild. This isn't legal, you can't. But her voice cracked, fear seeping through. It's legal, I said, leaning in, my gaze locked on Richard's. and it's justice. You threw me out, called me a burden. Now I'm your reckoning. I pushed the transfer papers forward. Sign or lose it all. Richard's shoulders slumped, his empire crumbling in his eyes. Margaret's tears were rage, not remorse, her hands trembling as she clutched the pen. They signed, the scratch of ink like a confession of their sins. As the papers were notarized, a wave of relief crashed over me, warm and exhilarating. My chest loosened, a decade of pain melting away. I did it. Triumph surged, my lips curving into a smile I couldn't suppress. The board stared, some in awe, others in shock, as Richard and Margaret sat defeated, their legacy mine. Voss Enterprises became my platform. I restructured it. Redirecting profits to educational charities, my parents' dream. Richard and Margaret faded into obscurity, their wealth and status gone. I didn't need to gloat. Their fall was my victory, a testament to the orphan they tried to erase. This story isn't just about revenge. It's about reclaiming your worth. Betrayal cuts deep, leaving scars that ache for years, but it can forge a strength you didn't know you had. Justice, when earned through grit and truth, restores balance. Have you ever fought back against those who tried to break you? It's a reminder, no one can erase you unless you let them. Wow, that was a ride, right? If this story gave you chills or fired you up, smash that like button and drop a comment. What's the most epic comeback you've ever seen or lived? I read every single one. If you love real-life stories of justice and triumph, hit subscribe and tap the bell for more. Thanks for watching. Never let anyone dim your light. See you next time.